And now, Working Man Radio with your host, Joe Lyles.
The statute in question is Florida Statute 776.041. Let me explain. Let me give you a little scenario. A very simple scenario. You walk into a bar. A man walks into a bar. You walk into a biker bar. And you walk up to the biggest, meanest, ugliest biker, and you say, "Hey, son bitch, I hear you ride a rice grinder." And then you pull out your white glove and you dust his face with it. And the guy takes offense at this and puts his dukes up and starts to whip your ass. Of course, turns out you can handle yourself. So you start fighting back. You start defending yourself, which you're not privileged to do because you started it. You, first of all, and by the way, the word is provoked. It says you may not use force if you provoked the use of force. It does not require you to initiate the force. It only requires that you provoke the use of force. Are you follow me? What that means is if I say, hey there, foot and mouth breath, and you take a swing at me, I provoked it. Right? I may not have lifted a hand against you, but I provoked it. Hey, some bitch. Take a swing. I provoked it. I don't have the privilege to defend myself. There's an argument to be said that that's what that means. But there's an exception. Now, let's say that we start duking it out, and all of a sudden, the biker dude I started the fight. I started it. The biker dude reaches around in his back pocket and pulls out his Pete. Pulls out his heater. Pulls out his Roscoe. It just so happens I got a Roscoe in my back pocket. I see his Roscoe and I pull mine out. Blam, 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 and shoot him dead. I started the fight. He introduced deadly force. I pulled my deadly force out and shot him. Not guilty, not at common law. At common law, I'm guilty of manslaughter. Because he wouldn't be dead if I hadn't started the fight. I have got to have some blame for starting the fight. I have to carry some legal culpability for having started the fight. It's called imperfect self-defense. This statute that says that if I reasonably believe myself in imminent danger of deadly force, even though I provoked the use of force, that if I all of a sudden I believe that I'm in imminent danger of death or serious injury, even though I started it, I may use deadly force. And while the statute isn't clear, it suggests that I walk free, that there is no culpability, that there is no imperfect self-defense, and some commentator somewhere has indeed said that Florida does not recognize imperfect self-defense. Which means that you can start a fight, and if the other party introduces deadly force, you may shoot him dead and walk free. Now, juries. What do we say about juries? Started the show talking about juries. What do juries have? Juries have an absolute right to acquit you. They have an absolute right to acquit you, and in circumstances such as the George Zimmerman case, where George Zimmerman can make a, however paper thin, a case he can make, that, I was in imminent danger. He was pounding my head on the sidewalk. Didn't cause me a concussion. Didn't put any stitches in the back of my head. I had a scrape on the back of my head, which we don't know how he got that. He may have gotten that by just merely falling on the sidewalk or scraping his head against the side. I don't know how he got it, and you don't either. But all he's got to do is stitch up some facial justification that puts him in imminent danger. I was afraid for my life. And he can start the fight. He can start. This means that you can go down in a place where you don't live. You can walk into a bar with black folks in it, right? You can walk into a black bar where everybody in there is black. And you can walk in there and say, hey, you bunch of Negroes. Only you don't use that word. You use the stronger word that nobody likes. And if one of them pulls his piece, and if one of them takes a swing at you, and you start duking it out, and if he pulls a pistol out, then you can shoot him dead and walk free. It means that if you see somebody in your neighborhood who you don't like, who doesn't belong here, you can go and start trouble with him. You can go and put your hands on him. And if he defends himself at all, and there's nobody around, you can simply claim that this Negro who did not belong, he was in a place he didn't belong, and he's scary. And so I had no choice, which is what Zimmerman's doing. Which is why this is the open season on Negroes law, because black folks will not benefit from this law. Black folks will not be acquitted in circumstances with George Zimmerman. And the people who wrote the law know it. And that is why it is so critical that George Zimmerman's credibility is so critical. That's why when George Zimmerman says, he jumped out of some bushes at me, it is important to point out to the jury that there were no bushes there. That when George Zimmerman says that Trayvon Martin punched him, he said he punched him. That Trayvon Martin threw the first punch while he was on the phone talking to his girlfriend. No, sorry, George, he didn't throw the first punch. These things are critical. These things are critical because the jury cannot believe George Zimmerman when he says he was bashing my head against the sidewalk. And this is why looking at his injuries, which were in the end superficial. And it is critically important that the jury understand that George Zimmerman is a liar. Because if George Zimmerman is a liar, then the jury the jury looks at the expert testimony that says this guy didn't suffer any serious injury. He suffered minor superficial injuries. That's the expert testimony, and that's what we know. We know he suffered no concussion. He did not require any stitches in his head. His injuries were consistent with a little fisticuffs. Well, Saturday night's all right for fighting kind of injuries. That's what he got. From a 17-year-old kid, George Zimmerman wanted to try to detain him. George Zimmerman wanted to be the tough guy. George Zimmerman provoked the affray, and Trayvon Martin got the best of him. A kid walking down the street minding his own business. That's what we have. We have a kid walking down the street minding his own business. The demons, the animosity, the anger, the hatred, every bad idea, every bad thought, all the fear and all the hate and all the animosity and all the resentment is on one side of the equation. And that's what was in the head of the man who and he may have been on the bottom. But the question is, was his belief reasonable? And I think that once the jury decides that Zimmerman's lying, then they're going to find him guilty of something. But they might not. They might not, and that raises a very serious specter. It raises the specter of what happens. What happens if George Zimmerman is acquitted?
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. You've been listening to Working Man Radio with Joe Lyle at joelylesradio.com.